That morning, the banging on my door wasn't just loud. It rattled the frame like somebody was trying to knock the whole house down. I opened it, and there stood two police officers, cruisers idling at the curb, and right behind them stood Meredith Blake, the kind of woman who clutched a clipboard like it was a crown. She smirked at me like a cat who'd already eaten the canary and said I was illegally keeping neighbors out of the community pool. Now here's the kicker. That pool wasn't the HOA's. It wasn't some community perk. It was my family's, built by my grandfather in 1962 when this land was nothing but mesquite trees and red dirt. He wasn't rich, wasn't a developer. He was a bricklayer who mixed every wheelbarrow of concrete with his own hands, who laid every tile until his palms bled. My dad kept it alive after him, patching the cracks, oiling the diving board, mowing the grass. And when my dad passed and I came back from a burnout corporate life in Dallas, restoring that pool was my therapy. It was how I reconnected with him, with my childhood, with something solid in a world that had chewed me up. That pool wasn't just water, it was legacy. And Meredith thought she could steal it with a phone call. At first, I laughed. I thought it was just a mix-up. I crumpled the letter she left in my mailbox and figured that was the end of it. But that was my first mistake, underestimating how far a woman like Meredith was willing to push. 2 days later, she strutted into my driveway in her silver SUV, heels clicking on gravel like she owned the place. Clipboard tucked under her arm, sunglasses the size of hubcaps. She marched right up to my gate and said, "Mr. Lawson, as HOA president, I must insist you unlock the pool immediately. Residents are waiting." I leaned on the skimmer pole, trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, this isn't community property. My grandfather built it before your subdivision even existed." She gave me this fake laugh, sharp and squeaky. "Oh, I think you're mistaken. Our maps clearly show your parcel inside the association boundaries, which means the pool is ours." Now, I'd seen those HOA plats before, lines drawn wherever it was convenient. But my deed, notarized and filed with the county, told the real story. "Those maps are wrong," I said dead calm. "This pool is mine. End of discussion." Her smile thinned into a blade. "If you refuse, you'll face daily fines and a lien on your property. I'd hate to see you lose your land over a misunderstanding." That was the moment I realized it wasn't about swimming. It was about power. And Meredith wasn't bluffing. The very next morning, there was a bright orange notice taped to my gate. $500 a day in fines until I opened the pool. I stood there holding the paper, sunlight flickering across the water, and I thought, so this is war. It escalated fast. She slapped another notice, then another. She even bolted a shiny community pool rules sign to my fence, listing hours and no diving regulations, like she'd just branded cattle she didn't own. Neighbors started wandering up asking if they could swim, because Meredith had told them their fees had been paying for pool upkeep all along. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just overreach. This was fraud. One young couple looked genuinely embarrassed when I showed them a black and white photo of my grandfather beside the pool in '62, cigarette tucked behind his ear, my dad as a grinning teenager on the diving board. I said, "This was here 30 years before Cedar Creek subdivision existed. You've been lied to." Their eyes widened, and they walked off in silence. But Meredith doubled down. She called the cops, claiming I was blocking community access. When the officers asked for proof, she bragged about collecting HOA fees for years. That one slip changed everything. Their eyebrows shot up, and suddenly she wasn't the righteous official. She was the woman charging people for something she didn't own. I invited them to walk the property line, and when they saw the pool fenced in the middle of my ranch, one officer shook his head and muttered, "Doesn't look like any HOA pool I've ever seen." Meredith's face burned red, but she kept pushing, promising escalation. That night, my neighbor Hank dropped by with a shoebox of old newspaper clippings. Yellowed headlines from the '60s, photos of my grandfather mixing concrete, of Hank himself as a teenager helping shovel dirt. It wasn't just proof, it was history. And then, tucked among those clippings, I found something newer, slicker, a glossy flyer for Cedar Creek Phase 2, luxury expansion. And there it was, my pool, photoshopped right into their brochure, pecan trees and all, being sold as part of a multi-million-dollar development plan. That was the moment my anger turned cold. This wasn't about a power trip, it was about money. Meredith wasn't trying to give neighbors a place to swim. She was prepping to sell my family's legacy to developers. I called an old college friend, Claire, who's now one of the toughest property rights attorneys in Texas. When I explained, she cut me off halfway. Ethan, that's fraud. Gather everything. Deeds, tax receipts, photos. I'll drive down this weekend. And sure enough, by Saturday my dining table looked like a war room. Claire spread out certified plats showing Cedar Creek's boundary ended a quarter-mile short of my fence. She laid newspaper clippings side by side with glossy HOA flyers. She even lined up every violation notice Meredith had ever taped to my gate, row after row like bright orange confessions. She's building our evidence file for us, Claire said with a grin. The real turning point came at the next HOA meeting. The community hall was packed, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, folding chairs scraping against tile. Meredith stood at the front, clipboard in hand, projecting slides of tennis courts, a clubhouse, and front and center, my pool. She announced, Phase 2 will bring unprecedented amenities, including our community pool. I stood. The room hushed. That pool is Hartstead Ranch property. It has never belonged to this HOA. And selling it in your expansion plan isn't progress, it's fraud. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire opened her briefcase and laid out deeds, plats, and photographs like exhibits in a courtroom. Neighbors craned their necks, eyes widening. One man shouted, "So all those fees we paid, where did the money go?" A mother with 3 kids stood trembling. I told my children this was their pool. You made me lie to them. Meredith tried to bang her clipboard for order, but the anger in that room was volcanic. And for the first time, she looked small, her power slipping through her fingers. Court followed, and it wasn't pretty for her. Claire walked the judge through every deed and plat, every false flyer, every penny residents had been conned out of. The judge ruled crystal clear. The pool was private, the HOA had no authority, and the case was being referred for fraud investigation. Meredith's face went pale, and the developer who'd backed her looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Now, I'd love to tell you that was the end of it, that Meredith packed up her clipboard and learned humility. Truth is, fraud investigations take time, and desperate people make desperate moves. Even now, there's tension in the air, like thunder just beyond the horizon. But one thing's certain, she overplayed her hand, and the community finally saw it. That pool, my grandfather's sweat in the concrete, my dad's care in every patched tile. It stands as proof that no piece of paper, no self-appointed queen with a clipboard, can erase legacy. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Lies can spread fast, but the truth has more weight. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA or a neighbor who pushed too far, tried to take something that wasn't theirs, tried to rewrite the truth? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you think justice was served, or maybe you think it wasn't, let's talk about it down below. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, because trust me, this battle may be over, but there are plenty more HOA wars waiting to be told.